Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide our viewers are tuning in. Now imagine this. Rimuru the Calculating suddenly enters the Tower of God universe. What happens next? Let's find out. The crowned game is already descending into chaos when the air shifts. Regulars clash across the stone arena of the second floor, Shinsoo surging in violent currents as lighthouses flare and spears carve glowing arcs through the pressure-heavy atmosphere. The tower is doing what it does best, suffocating the weak and rewarding the ruthless. A shockwave detonates near the throne platform, sending two competitors skidding across cracked stone. Blood mixes with condensed Shinsoo vapor. Then, without warning, the pressure compresses inward as if the entire battlefield has inhaled at once. Space distorts above the arena and folds in on itself. It is not a gate opening. It is reality correcting an intrusion too powerful to ignore. A figure steps through the distortion and lands lightly on the battlefield. Silver-blue hair settles over a long black coat. Golden eyes scan the scene once, calm and analytical. Rimuru Tempest does not look surprised. He does not look impressed. He looks like someone assessing a new system. The nearest regular reacts on instinct, launching forward with a blade reinforced by dense Shinsoo. The strike is precise and lethal. It never lands. The Shinsoo coating the weapon disintegrates mid-swing and flows toward Rimuru like water pulled by gravity. The blade becomes ordinary steel in an instant. Rimuru does not dodge. He does not block. He simply stands there as the energy meant to kill him is absorbed into his body. The attacker stumbles backward, suddenly lightheaded, feeling the Shinsoo ripped from his control. High above the arena, Hansung Yu's playful expression fades. Quant checks the measurement system, expecting irregular spikes. The readings surge past acceptable thresholds in a blink. Number. The device attempts recalculation and fails. Sparks burst from the console as the system overloads. The floor of test responds automatically, activating a high-density Shinsoo suppression wave meant to crush unstable entrants. The invisible force slams downward across the battlefield. Regulars collapse to one knee. Lighthouses flicker violently. Even experienced climbers gasp as the weight increases. Rimuru remains upright. For a brief second, the Shinsoo presses against him, searching for dominance. Then it bends. The pressure does not push him down. It pours into him. Great Sage activates instantly, dissecting the structure of Shinsoo at a conceptual level. Magical particulate composition, environmental contract binding, flow manipulation through administrative authority. The analysis completes almost as soon as it begins. Adaptation follows without hesitation. A faint pulse radiates from Rimuru's body. Within a growing radius, the crushing pressure disappears entirely, not repelled, not neutralized, consumed. The surrounding Shinsoo thins as if drained by an unseen vortex. Regulars nearby choke as their techniques destabilize. Barriers flicker out, reinforcements collapse. The entire battlefield loses equilibrium because one individual treats the tower's sacred medium as nourishment. Bam feels the shift immediately. Shinsoo has always responded to him with effort, like something that must be convinced. Around Rimuru, it behaves differently. It flows willingly, instinctively. Rock's instincts flare in warning. Khun's sharp gaze narrows as calculations rearrange in his mind. This is not raw power thrashing against the system. This is control achieved through understanding. Rimuru lifts one hand slightly, observing how the currents respond. The Shinsoo coils around his fingers, not violently but obediently, like a resource awaiting instruction. He is not forcing dominance. He has already integrated the rules, and that realization spreads through the observers above like a quiet alarm. The tower's internal log registers an anomaly. Irregular detected, authority source unknown, energy classification incompatible with Shinsoo contracts. The test was designed to measure ambition and endurance. Instead, It has exposed a presence that does not struggle against the rules, but rewrites its relationship to them. Rimuru lowers his hand and surveys the fractured arena with composed certainty. If this structure has a hierarchy, he will learn it. If it has limits, he will find them. And if it attempts to restrict him, it will discover that not all irregulars climb to survive. Some arrive already capable of ruling. The administrators attempt to correct the imbalance immediately. Hidden control nodes embedded within the floor surge, redirecting Shinsoo flow patterns to stabilize the arena. What should be a seamless recalibration instead becomes erratic turbulence. The currents do not respond as expected. They hesitate around Rimuru's presence, warping in spirals that defy the tower's governing equations. Quant deploys a localized compression field directly over Rimuru's coordinates, increasing density to levels that have broken seasoned rankers during training simulations. The air thickens again, stone tiles crack beneath invisible weight, and several regulars black out entirely. Rimuru finally exhales, not from strain, but mild curiosity. Within his consciousness, Great Sage continues its rapid analysis, mapping the tower's layered authority system. Shinsoo is not merely energy, it is permission. It flows according to contracts between climbers and administrators, moderated by rules that maintain hierarchy. Rimuru identifies the flaw instantly. His existence here carries no contract, no binding clause, no administrative leash. The tower is attempting to apply restrictions to something that never signed its terms. He takes one deliberate step forward. The compression field collapses like glass under pressure. The redirected Shinsoo does not disperse randomly. It streams into Rimuru in a controlled current, filtered and converted into his internal energy reserves. The absorption is efficient, clean, almost elegant. A faint ripple expands outward as the sudden vacuum destabilizes techniques across the arena. A spear bearer attempting to strike finds his weapon losing cohesion mid-thrust. A lighthouse operator watches in disbelief as her carefully calculated barriers unravel because the medium sustaining them has thinned. Hansung's voice loses its playful cadence. This is no longer an entertaining anomaly. This is structural interference. Below, Khun's mind races. Power he can account for. Strategy he can counter. But this is systemic dominance. Rimuru is not overpowering opponents. He is adjusting the battlefield itself. Bam stares, sensing something deeper than strength. There is no malice radiating from Rimuru, no hunger for destruction, only assessment, evaluation, decision-making in progress. The crowned game throne stands momentarily unattended at the center of the arena, its symbolic authority meaningless in the face of the unfolding disruption. A coalition of desperate regulars charges together, combining Shinsoo into a unified wave designed to overwhelm by sheer volume. The attack surges like a tidal wall, dense and coordinated. Rimuru watches it approach with the detached focus of a scholar observing an experiment. Beelzebub activates. The wave vanishes. Not scattered, not deflected, gone. Absorbed so completely that the air behind it becomes unnaturally clear. The charging regulars skid to a halt, terror replacing determination as they realize their combined output has fueled the very entity they attempted to eliminate. Inside Rimuru's mind, new subroutines form. Shinsoo manipulation acquired, density modulation integrated, external environmental override, potential calculated. The tower's primary weapon has become a resource library. Above the arena, warning sigils flash across observation panels. Energy levels no longer correspond to input values. The system attempts to isolate Rimuru's presence as a contaminant. Containment protocols initiate, drawing on administrator authority to restrict flow in a sealed perimeter around him. The Shinsoo inside that perimeter is ordered to stagnate, to refuse cooperation. For a fraction of a second, the current resists Rimuru. Then it yields. Not because he forces it, but because he rewrites its behavior at the molecular level. The stagnation command dissolves as Shinsoo reconfigures under his influence, recognizing a more dominant directive. The sealed perimeter collapses, and the backlash sends a tremor through the floor's foundation. A thin fracture splits the arena wall from ceiling to ground. Silence spreads across the battlefield, broken only by shallow breathing and falling debris. Regulars who moments ago fought viciously now stare at the silver-haired figure standing at the epicenter of the distortion. The test has lost meaning. Victory conditions feel irrelevant. The hierarchy that governs this place has faltered in front of them. Rimuru glances upward, golden eyes focusing beyond stone and steel, beyond the visible structure. He can feel the network behind the floor, the layered authority channels threading upward through the tower's countless levels. It is intricate, efficient, designed to filter out weakness and reward ambition through controlled suffering. Efficient systems interest him. Oppressive ones do not. He extends his perception further, just enough to confirm a suspicion. The tower is alive in function, if not in flesh. It observes, it calculates, and now it is recalculating him. A faint smile touches his expression. If this place intends to measure his worth, it will need new metrics. Below him, the fractured stone shifts as residual Shinsoo currents swirl uncertainly, no longer certain which master to obey. The floor of test was built to break climbers at the beginning of their ascent. Instead, it has encountered a being who treats ascension as a formality. And as stabilization alarms continue to echo through unseen chambers, one conclusion becomes unavoidable. The tower is no longer fully in control of its own foundation. The tremor does not stop at the arena walls. It travels upward through the lattice of Shinsoo channels that connect every floor, a vibration too subtle for regulars to understand, yet too violent for administrators to ignore. Deep within the unseen core of the second floor, an ancient presence stirs. The administrator does not possess a human face or voice, but it possesses authority, and that authority has just been challenged. A pulse descends. Unlike the crude compression fields deployed earlier, this pressure is absolute. It is not simply dense Shinsoo, it is the law. A command embedded in the tower's architecture that declares all foreign variables must submit. The air crystallizes, light bends. Every remaining regular is forced flat against the stone, as if gravity has multiplied tenfold. Lighthouses shatter under the strain. Even rankers observing remotely feel their connection flicker. Rimuru feels it clearly. This is not an attack meant to injure. It is a command meant to define his limits. Great Sage processes the structure instantly. Administrative override, hierarchical enforcement protocol. The tower is attempting to bind him retroactively, to classify him under its system and assign him a permissible ceiling. Rimuru's expression shifts from curiosity to quiet interest. Within his internal space, calculations branch outward at incomprehensible speed. If Shinsoo is permission-based energy, then authority can be analyzed. If authority can be analyzed, it can be replicated. If replicated, it can be improved. The pressure increases again, trying to force a kneeling posture. Rimuru does the opposite. He steps forward. The motion is small, but the implication is enormous. The administrator's law does not recognize resistance of this type. Shinsoo trembles violently between two directives: submit to the tower, respond to Rimuru. For a moment, the entire floor exists in deadlock. Then Rimuru activates Beelzebub at a far deeper threshold. He does not consume the administrator itself. Not yet. He consumes the command. The oppressive law dissolves into raw information as it is absorbed, dissected, and converted. Great Sage reconstructs the structure in real time, mapping the code that governs Shinsoo distribution. Within seconds, Rimuru understands how the floor allocates pressure, how it measures potential, how it enforces obedience. The crushing force evaporates. Regulars gasp as gravity returns to normal. Broken lighthouses fall silent. Dust drifts slowly through air that no longer feels like it is trying to kill them. Above, warning systems cascade into red across multiple chambers. The administrator withdraws its direct enforcement pulse, not out of mercy, but out of recalculation. It has encountered something that does not reject authority, yet does not submit to it either. Rimuru has integrated a fragment of its governance model into himself. On the battlefield, Khun forces himself upright, eyes locked on Rimuru, with a mixture of fascination and alarm. This is no reckless powerhouse. Every movement is measured. Every escalation is controlled. Bam feels something even more unsettling. The Shinsoo around Rimuru is no longer just flowing toward him. It is stabilizing around him, as if his presence provides clearer structure than the floor's own regulation. Rimuru surveys the devastation without triumph. The cracked arena, the unconscious regulars, the fractured hierarchy. None of it excites him. What captures his attention is the network he sensed beyond the surface. The tower is layered authority built upon ancient contracts, and contracts can be rewritten. A sudden distortion forms at the edge of the arena. Not a violent tear this time, but a precise incision in space. A figure materializes within it, tall and composed, radiating controlled menace. A ranker dispatched early, bypassing protocol in response to the anomaly. His eyes settle on Rimuru with immediate hostility. Orders have already been given. Eliminate the irregular before the disruption spreads. Shinsoo condenses around the ranker in elegant spirals, forming a domain that isolates the battlefield into a private execution ground. Unlike the chaotic attacks from regulars, this field is refined, sharpened by experience, and sanctioned by the tower's structure. Rimuru recognizes the escalation instantly. So this is how the tower corrects errors. The ranker moves first, vanishing in compressed Shinsoo, and reappearing within striking distance, palm aimed directly at Rimuru's chest. The impact detonates with enough force to pulverize reinforced stone. The arena floor caves inward, shockwaves blasting debris outward in a violent ring. When the dust settles, Rimuru stands at the center of the crater, coat fluttering slightly from the residual force. The Shinsoo embedded in the ranker's strike is already dissolving into him. Golden eyes lift to meet the ranker's stunned expression. For the first time since arriving, Rimuru speaks, his voice calm yet carrying effortlessly through the fractured arena. If this tower intends to measure me, it should send something capable of understanding what it is measuring. The ranker's domain flickers, because the Shinsoo sustaining it is thinning again. Not stolen recklessly, but absorbed with precision. The floor of test was never designed for battles of this magnitude. Its foundation groans under pressure as two incompatible authorities collide. Above, deeper levels of the tower begin receiving updated anomaly reports. What started as a routine irregular entry has escalated into a structural threat. And standing at the epicenter of it all, Rimuru is no longer simply adapting. He is preparing to climb. The ranker does not hesitate again. Pride overrides caution. His domain tightens, compressing Shinsoo into razor-thin layers that slice through the air with invisible precision. Each movement he makes leaves after images of condensed energy, a technique refined over decades of sanctioned battles. He is not a reckless regular throwing power blindly. He is execution shaped into human form. He attacks from every angle at once. Shinsoo blades converge on Rimuru's position, intersecting in a lattice meant to erase anything caught inside. The arena floor disintegrates under the layered cuts. Stone becomes powder. The throne platform splits cleanly in half. Observers above lose visual clarity as the battlefield turns into a storm of controlled annihilation. Inside that storm, Rimuru's perception accelerates. Thought acceleration multiplies his processing speed beyond the rhythm of the fight. Every blade, every fluctuation in density, every shift in the ranker's breathing pattern becomes data. Great Sage isolates the core mechanism sustaining the domain. It is not raw output. It is authority reinforced by experience, layered contracts strengthening the ranker's command over Shinsoo. Rimuru smiles faintly. Experience can be copied. Beelzebub expands again. Not outward, but inward, drawing in the Shinsoo constructs the moment they approach. Each absorbed fragment delivers structural insight, flow pattern memorized, compression ratio calculated, authority signature identified. The lattice collapses mid-formation. The ranker's eyes widen as his own techniques begin responding sluggishly, as if passing through unfamiliar resistance. He increases output, pouring more Shinsoo into the domain to compensate. The floor trembles harder, cracks spread like veins across the walls. Emergency stabilization sigils flare and burn out one after another. Rimuru raises his hand. This time the Shinsoo does not simply coil around his fingers. It reorganizes. A new domain manifests, layered over the rankers like a superior blueprint overriding a flawed design. The pressure within it is smoother, more refined, infinitely more stable. Where the ranker's control is forceful, Rimuru's is absolute. The ranker attempts to retreat. He cannot. The surrounding Shinsoo no longer recognizes him as its sole authority. It hesitates between masters, then aligns with the stronger directive. The execution field that once obeyed him now responds to Rimuru's will. Rimuru steps forward through the collapsing storm, untouched. "You rely on borrowed law," he says calmly. "I do not." With a subtle motion, he returns the technique. The compressed layers of Shinsoo reform, identical in structure but magnified in efficiency. The lattice closes around the ranker before he can escape. There is no dramatic explosion this time, no spectacle, only silence. When the pressure releases, the ranker is gone. Not scattered, not wounded, gone. Absorbed so completely that even his authority signature has vanished from the floor's registry. For 3 full seconds, nothing moves. Regulars who can still stand stare at the empty space where a ranker once existed. Khun's mind struggles to process the implication. Rankers are not supposed to disappear. They are pillars of the tower's hierarchy. Bam feels the Shinsoo stabilize again, but differently than before. It is calmer, clearer, as if a distortion has been corrected rather than created. Above the arena, every monitoring system on the second floor goes dark for a heartbeat. The administrator recoils. A ranker has not merely been defeated. He has been erased from the tower's functional structure. His authority did not return to the system. It was claimed. Deep within the unseen layers of governance, alarms propagate upward. An irregular has consumed a sanctioned enforcer and replicated his control. Containment probability drops. Escalation pathways activate. On the battlefield, Rimuru stands alone at the center of a ruined arena, golden eyes reflecting fractured stone and stunned climbers. Within his internal space, new data settles into place. Advanced Shinsoo domain manipulation acquired. Authority integration successful. Compatibility stable. He looks upward again, this time not searching but acknowledging. The tower is watching. Good. If it intends to test him, it will need to understand something fundamental. He is not here to struggle against oppression. He is not here to beg for permission to climb. He is here because he can. The remaining fragments of the ranker's domain dissolve into ambient flow, now aligned subtly with Rimuru's presence. The floor's foundation creaks under lingering stress, but it does not collapse. It endures. For now. Across higher levels, powerful figures begin receiving the same report. Irregular, unbound, adaptive, ranker eliminated, authority assimilated. What began as a routine test on the lowest proving ground has become a declaration that echoes through the tower's spine. The floor of test was meant to break newcomers. Instead, it has revealed something far more dangerous, an existence that does not climb the tower to reach the top, an existence that may redefine what the top even means. The arena does not recover from what just happened. It pretends to. The cracked stone settles, unconscious regulars are dragged to the edges, and the administrators force the remaining tests to resume as if a rancor was not erased minutes ago. But tension lingers in the air like a storm that never fully passed. Every climber on the second floor now understands one thing with absolute clarity. The silver-haired irregular standing quietly among them is not another competitor. He is a variable the tower cannot categorize. Khun Aguero Agnis watches him with sharpened focus. While others feel fear, Khun feels opportunity. Power alone does not win the tower. Control does. Information does. Positioning does. And right now, the most valuable piece on the board is not the throne in the crown game. It is Rimuru Tempest. Bam approaches first, driven by instinct rather than strategy. Shinsoo still swirls differently around Rimuru. Calmer, almost structured. Bam senses no hostility from him, no hunger for domination. Only calculation layered over quiet confidence. Rock circles from a distance, spear resting on his shoulder, reptilian instincts warning him that charging blindly would be suicide. Khun, however, steps forward with composed elegance, lighthouse hovering at his side, blue eyes assessing every micro-expression. "You are not climbing like the rest of us," Khun says evenly, voice carrying just enough to test reaction without provoking aggression. "You are studying the tower." Rimuru's gaze shifts toward him, not dismissive, not impressed. Evaluating. "That would be efficient," Rimuru replies calmly. Khun smiles slightly. Honest, direct. No attempt at intimidation. That alone makes him more dangerous. Most powerful individuals in the tower announce themselves with spectacle. This one has already demonstrated annihilation and now stands as if discussing weather patterns. Khun activates a subtle lighthouse scan, not to measure raw output, but to analyze behavioral rhythm. Heart rate stable, breathing even, no spike in aggression. This is not someone riding adrenaline. This is someone who made a decision before arriving. "Then allow me to offer something useful," Khun continues. "The tower rewards alliances as much as strength. Those who try to dominate too early attract forces far worse than regulars." Rimuru does not answer immediately. His internal analysis runs deeper than Khun realizes. Social hierarchy structure detected. Multi-layer faction conflict probability high. Central authority threatened by irregular anomaly. He has already concluded that solitary ascension will provoke escalating resistance. Cooperation, even temporary, provides data and reduces premature confrontation. "You are proposing partnership," Rimuru states. "I am proposing leverage," Khun corrects smoothly. "You clearly do not need protection, but information is a different currency." For the first time, a faint trace of interest sharpens in Rimuru's golden eyes. Information is valuable, especially in a system built on concealed rules and hidden contracts. He can overpower what stands before him, but understanding what governs what stands above him is another matter. Around them, other regulars pretend not to listen while listening to every word. Rumors are already spreading. The irregular who consumed a rancor. The system glitch made flesh. Some see a weapon, others see catastrophe. Bam steps closer, looking between them. "We can climb together," he says earnestly, unaware of the political weight pressing down on the conversation. "The tests are easier when we trust each other." Khun glances at Bam briefly, then back at Rimuru. Trust is not what he is offering. He is offering controlled proximity to a force that may destabilize the entire tower. If he aligns correctly, he survives. If he miscalculates, he becomes collateral. Rimuru studies Khun for a long second. He recognizes intelligence that does not rely on brute force, strategic mind, adaptive, potentially useful, also potentially dangerous if left unchecked. "What do you gain?" Rimuru asks calmly, "by standing beside me?" Khun does not hesitate. Survival and influence over how this floor responds to you. That answer is honest enough to matter. High above, observers note the interaction with growing concern. The irregular is not isolating himself. He is integrating. That makes suppression exponentially more complicated. A lone anomaly can be targeted. A networked anomaly spreads. Rimuru considers the tower's pattern. Climbers are filtered through suffering to generate ambition. The system thrives on competition. But competition can be redirected. If he chooses his allies carefully, he does not merely climb. He reshapes the climb itself. "Very well," Rimuru says at last. "You will provide information. I will ensure no one here dies unnecessarily." It is not a promise of obedience. It is a declaration of capability. Khun's smile widens slightly. The gamble is set in motion. He has just aligned himself with the most unpredictable force the tower has seen in centuries, and whether that decision elevates him or destroys him will depend on how quickly he can understand the mind of the being now walking beside him as the next test begins to activate. The alliance, tenuous as it is, shifts the atmosphere of the arena. Regulars sense a new hierarchy forming, unspoken but undeniable. Khun's strategy, precise and calculated, begins to intertwine with Rimuru's raw adaptability. They do not speak much, but every glance, every slight movement carries meaning. Khun feeds subtle information about the test layouts, the hidden Shinsoo traps, and even which competitors are likely to be lethal versus those who are expendable. Rimuru absorbs it all without hesitation, processing and integrating it into his awareness, not as an outsider, but as a participant capable of rewriting the rules. The very floor seems to recognize this alliance, the currents of Shinsoo shifting subtly in response to their combined presence. Even Bam feels the difference, the Shinsoo around them behaving more predictably, less chaotic, as if the tower itself acknowledges the formation of a new center of power. As the next trial begins, Khun predicts potential ambush points, guiding Rimuru and Bam through the maze of attacks with surgical precision. Every regular attempting to flank them finds themselves countered not by brute force, but by subtle anticipation. The Shinsoo responds almost instinctively to Rimuru's presence, now layered with Khun's strategy, forming a flow that neutralizes threats before they can fully manifest. Regulars falter, stepping into traps they do not realize exist, not because they were caught off guard by a single attack, but because the environment itself has subtly shifted to favor the new alliance. Even small errors in judgment are punished instantly. The feedback loop of the tower's mechanics now working against the very individuals meant to dominate it. The crowd of climbers remaining on the floor whispers among themselves, uncertain whether to fear or revere what they are witnessing. Khun senses the tower beginning to overcompensate in response to Rimuru's presence. Walls of condensed Shinsoo attempt to corral the irregular, but Rimuru does not fight the current. He absorbs it, deconstructs it, and rebuilds it to support movement, creating pathways that allow them to navigate the arena with fluid precision. Each barrier that should have blocked them becomes a channel. Each trap designed to punish missteps is neutralized before it can claim a victim. Bam begins to notice a strange harmony forming, as if the tower itself is simultaneously resisting and accommodating them, creating tension that teeters on the edge of chaos. The subtle brilliance of Khun's strategy is amplified by Rimuru's capacity to integrate the mechanics of the tower into his own decision-making. Every action becomes a test, but one that Rimuru chooses to define rather than simply survive. Other regulars begin to attempt manipulation, trying to influence Khun or isolate Rimuru to regain dominance, but their efforts are too slow. Every move they make is anticipated and neutralized almost effortlessly. One competitor attempts a surprise strike from behind, only to find that Rimuru has already projected the path of the attack and countered it before the weapon even reaches its mark. The attacker freezes mid-motion, stunned by the impossibility of what just occurred, as the Shinsoo around him retracts in subtle waves, leaving him vulnerable and disoriented. It is not destruction that Rimuru delivers, but precision, control, and the quiet assertion of authority. Khun watches, eyes narrowing thoughtfully, realizing the tower has never seen anything like this, and neither have the climbers. As the trial progresses, Rimuru and Khun's collaboration begins to reshape the rules of engagement themselves. The tower relies on failure to create hierarchy, but now failure becomes less predictable. The system designed to punish missteps cannot calculate this partnership. Strategic positions that were meant to isolate climbers no longer work, and every attempt at suppression is met not with defiance, but with seamless integration. Climbers are thrown into confusion. Rankers observing remotely begin questioning standard protocols, and even administrators controlling peripheral variables hesitate, unsure how to respond to an entity that does not resist in the way the tower expects, but instead absorbs, adapts, and neutralizes every attempt at control. In the midst of all this, Khun's gamble becomes clear to him, even as Rimuru remains unreadable. By aligning with the irregular, Khun has gained more than temporary protection. He has gained a window into a method of control the tower itself cannot fully enforce. By offering strategic knowledge, he ensures survival while influencing the path of the anomaly, shaping not just the trial but the trajectory of the entire alliance. Khun understands the risk, one misstep, one misalignment of trust, and Rimuru's perception could make him expendable. Yet he proceeds, calculating that the potential benefits far outweigh the danger, because with Rimuru's capacity for adaptation, even the impossible becomes manageable. The arena continues to react to the presence of this combined force. Shinsoo currents bend and coil, subtly altering flow patterns to accommodate the integration of their strategies. Regulars stumble in confusion. Bam and Rak adjust instinctively to the environment. Their movements synchronize not because they are perfect, but because Rimuru's subtle manipulation of the floor has created space for calculated maneuvering. Every attack against them, every trap laid, and every attempt to manipulate the battle is now part of a system that Rimuru understands fully, and Khun exploits strategically. Together they turn the trial into a landscape of precision and control, where the tower's own mechanics designed to measure and punish climbers now reinforce their advantage and set the stage for consequences no one could have predicted. The floor, once a proving ground, begins to feel the weight of a presence that cannot be ignored. Every participant, from regulars to those observing remotely, realizes that the rules they depended on no longer apply in the same way. The tower measures ambition through suffering. Yet here's a climber who does not suffer, and an ally who understands how to manipulate that difference. The game is no longer about surviving tests, it is about redefining them. And as Rimuru walks calmly beside Khun, golden eyes scanning the battlefield with unshakable confidence, every observer begins to understand the terrifying potential of a partnership that may not just climb the tower, but reshape it entirely. The effects of Rimuru and Khun's collaboration ripple far beyond the immediate arena. The tower is designed to monitor climbers as individuals, each step calculated to test their limits. But now an unexpected pattern emerges. Two minds are operating in parallel, one wielding raw adaptability and the other strategic foresight, forming a synergy the system cannot fully quantify. Every attempt by regulars to isolate or manipulate them fails because the underlying mechanics of Shinsoo have been subtly altered. Flow patterns, previously predictable, now bend and shift as Rimuru integrates external variables, converting them into usable data and reshaping authority in real time. Even Bam notices the difference, the currents around them no longer simply responding to exertion, but to intelligent redirection. The tower is resisting, yet accommodating, caught in a paradox it cannot reconcile. Khun's mind races, understanding that his gamble is only beginning to yield results. By aligning with Rimuru, he is no longer merely a participant, but a node in a network of influence. Every piece of information he provides is integrated and enhanced by Rimuru's processing, turning foresight into preemptive control. A competitor tries to exploit the alliance's perceived weakness, launching a coordinated assault designed to split attention between Bam and Rimuru. The attack is elegant, precise, meant to force a reaction and measure response time. Rimuru, however, does not react in the conventional sense. He has already mapped trajectories, predicted energy expenditure, and neutralized threats before they manifest fully, using absorbed Shinsoo to create pathways through the battlefield that make the assault ineffective without needing to engage directly. The attackers stumble into their own miscalculations, their attacks dissolving mid-air as authority flows away from them and toward Rimuru's presence. Every observer begins to notice the impossibility of the situation. The regulars and rankers alike are forced to acknowledge that the anomaly does not follow expected rules. Control is not seized through aggression, but through assimilation and understanding. Khun silently evaluates the implications, recognizing that the tower's methods of filtering climbers through suffering and elimination are now being redirected. By working together, they are not merely surviving, they are shaping the environment itself. The crown game, designed to foster competition and create hierarchy, now functions more like a testing ground for the anomaly itself, a variable that may rewrite the expected outcomes entirely. Rimuru's calm extends outward, influencing the behavior of the Shinsoo around him. The currents no longer resist their passage but instead respond to subtle cues, creating corridors and shields that allow movement with surgical precision. The remaining regulars, attempting to capitalize on what they perceive as inexperience or overconfidence, find themselves caught in new patterns of pressure they cannot anticipate. Each step forward is calculated not as offense, but as spatial control, the battlefield itself becoming a manifestation of Rimuru's understanding combined with Khun's strategy. Bam follows instinctively, and Rock adjusts accordingly. Their movements smooth but guided by forces they cannot fully articulate. The effect is systemic, like a pulse radiating through every channel of the floor, altering dynamics in ways that are immediately noticeable yet cannot be countered by conventional tactics. Khun senses that their advantage grows not through power alone, but through influence over the system itself. By feeding information to Rimuru, he shapes not only tactical decisions, but the fundamental flow of authority across the floor. Climbers who attempt to challenge them find their attacks dissipated, redirected, or rendered irrelevant before they can have an effect. Even the environmental hazards designed to enforce compliance and punish missteps are subtly manipulated, no longer functioning as the tower intended. The test's inherent difficulty remains, but its constraints are bending around the anomaly. Khun realizes the gamble carries enormous risk. Misjudgment, mistrust, or underestimation of Rimuru's capacity could render him expendable. Yet the potential benefits of riding alongside a being capable of rewriting the floor's rules are undeniable, providing leverage, protection, and insight no other climber possesses. The regulars grow increasingly uneasy. Where the rules once dictated engagement, now improvisation and adaptability dominate. Attack patterns falter. Defensive formations collapse under subtle manipulation of Shinsoo flows that respond to Rimuru's intent rather than the tower's predetermined logic. A competitor attempts to flank them with a technique designed to trap them against an energy barrier. Rimuru absorbs the energy mid-flight, analyzes its structure, and converts it into usable force for repositioning. The flanker stumbles, confused and exposed. Even those watching from higher floors begin questioning the system's stability. Observers note that the tower has always depended on climbers acting predictably. Yet here is evidence that the anomaly can bend those rules without outright breaking them. The dynamics of power begin to shift in subtle, irreversible ways. Every calculated move, every integration of strategy with adaptation pushes the tower closer to acknowledging that the floor's authority can no longer contain or measure Rimuru. Khun recognizes that they are not merely passing a test, they are redefining it. Every hazard avoided, every threat neutralized, and every strategic insight utilized accumulates to form a new framework for engagement. The tower may still function outwardly as it always has, but beneath the surface, currents of authority and control are being rewritten in real time. Each climber on the floor is forced to adapt to this new reality, whether they recognize it or not. Rimuru, golden eyes scanning the battlefield, remains composed. The strategic value of allies, the manipulation of authority flows, and the absorption of environmental mechanics have given him far more than mere survival. He has a foothold over the tower's structure itself, a capacity to influence outcomes before challenges even arise. Khun, watching closely, understands the enormity of what he has helped initiate. Their partnership has turned the second floor from a proving ground into a controlled experiment under their command, a space where the tower's own mechanisms serve their advantage. With each movement, they solidify the unspoken hierarchy forming between them, a new axis of power that no competitor, no administrator, and perhaps no ranker can ignore. The arena, once predictable and designed to test climbers' limits, now exists in a state of subtle tension. Shinsoo bends, walls flex, and the air vibrates with controlled energy. Climbers falter, rankers observe warily, and administrators hesitate, all sensing that the anomaly has shifted the balance in ways they cannot yet quantify. Bam and Rock follow instinctively, guided not only by Rimuru's actions, but by the tower itself responding differently, the currents of Shinsoo now partially integrated into a system they do not control. Khun realizes the gamble has paid off, but also that the full consequences are only beginning to reveal themselves. Every calculated risk, every piece of strategic insight has brought them to a new plane of engagement. The floor, the tests, and the hierarchy they once relied upon are no longer absolute. They are mutable, and at the center of it all stands Rimuru, calm, observant, and entirely unbound. The floor, once a controlled proving ground, has become a stage for something the tower cannot fully comprehend. The regulars move cautiously, every strike now calculated against not just physical reaction, but against the invisible integration of Rimuru's influence. Their attacks fizzle before reaching their target, redirected, absorbed, or rendered useless by the subtle restructuring of Shinsoo around him. Even rankers observing remotely take note of the anomaly. Authority flows in patterns they do not recognize, and the system meant to enforce compliance now seems to hesitate, unsure how to respond. It is no longer a question of strength or speed, but of who can manipulate the rules of the environment itself. Every movement, every decision, every shift in strategy is now amplified through Rimuru's capacity to integrate information instantly, and Khun's understanding of the tower's mechanics ensures that each adaptation is applied with surgical precision. Khun's gamble becomes increasingly evident as the trial progresses. He does not act recklessly. He feeds precise information at critical moments, guiding Rimuru and Bam through deadly currents of Shinsoo, traps embedded in the arena, and attacks from desperate competitors. Each piece of information is multiplied in effectiveness by Rimuru's analytical processing, turning minor advantages into catastrophic disruptions for their opponents. The synergy between adaptability and strategy becomes undeniable, a perfect combination of raw capability and tactical foresight. Every move is not merely survival. It is manipulation of the battlefield at a fundamental level. The tower, designed to punish the unprepared, now watches its own constructs being subtly rewritten. Even the environmental hazards, the very instruments of authority and testing, bend around them, neutralized or redirected without overt aggression. Rimuru moves with effortless efficiency, every action precise, measured, and controlled. He does not fight out of necessity. He neutralizes threats as part of a greater understanding of the floor. Each technique deployed against him is absorbed, analyzed, and either repurposed or dissolved, leaving attackers stunned and exposed. One regular attempts a coordinated strike designed to overwhelm through numbers, but Rimuru disperses their energy before it coalesces, creating pathways of Shinsoo that allow them to maneuver freely while the aggressors falter. Khun's eyes narrow as he observes the cascading effects of their coordinated actions. The tower's hierarchy, its authority structures, and its expected methods of engagement are being destabilized. What should have been a test of survival and ambition has transformed into a demonstration of dominance, through comprehension, control, and foresight. Bam watches with awe, sensing the subtle difference in Shinsoo flows. Previously chaotic and reactive, the currents now move in harmony with Rimuru's presence, guided by his intent and amplified by Khun's strategic direction. Rak, too, notices the difference, adjusting his movements instinctively. The battlefield is no longer merely a space to traverse. It has become an extension of their combined will. Every attack, every hazard, every decision made by their opponents is now anticipated, countered, or repurposed, leaving climbers confused, disoriented, and increasingly desperate. The floor's trials, designed to reward strength and ingenuity, now exist primarily to challenge the adaptability of those who remain. And yet the anomaly at the center continues to move, calm and deliberate, reshaping the very mechanisms meant to constrain him. The remaining competitors begin to falter under the unrelenting efficiency of Rimuru and Khun's partnership. Techniques fail, traps misfire, and previously advantageous positions become liabilities. The tower, which relies on predictable patterns of failure to establish hierarchy, is confronted by a force that refuses to fit within expected variables. Khun senses the full implications of this. Their alliance has not only ensured survival, but also created leverage over the structure of the trial itself. By providing information and direction, he has aligned himself with a being whose presence can disrupt conventional order while simultaneously stabilizing strategic outcomes. The gamble carries immense risk, but the potential for control and influence is unparalleled. As the trial reaches its midpoint, the arena pulses with tension. Every climber on the floor senses the shift. Shinsoo currents coil and bend, environmental hazards lose their intended effect, and the remaining rankers and regulars hesitate, unsure how to respond to a presence that manipulates the rules without overt aggression. The tower's authority, once absolute within the arena, is now partially subject to the control of the anomaly at its center. Rimuru and Khun continue to move in perfect synchrony, each step, each decision, each adjustment reinforcing their unspoken hierarchy. The floor, the test, and the rules all bend subtly around them, creating a dynamic where survival, dominance, and influence are determined not by raw strength alone, but by the ability to manipulate the system itself. By the time the final wave of attacks begins, the alliance has become a single integrated unit. Rimuru neutralizes threats with quiet efficiency. Khun provides strategic insight to anticipate every hazard, and Bam and Rock adjust instinctively to the altered flow of Shinsoo. The regulars falter, their confidence eroded by the inability to predict outcomes, and the tower's own mechanisms fail to assert authority over the anomaly. What began as a test of individual potential has become a demonstration of systemic disruption, a proof that understanding, adaptation, and strategic alignment can surpass even the most carefully designed trials. As Rimuru walks calmly through the arena, Khun at his side, golden eyes scanning the battlefield with quiet assurance, the message is clear to all who watch. The tower's rules can be bent, its authority challenged, and its hierarchy redefined. The experiment has evolved beyond the expectations of its creators, and at the center of this transformation stands a being who will not merely climb the tower, but has already begun to reshape it in ways no one could have anticipated. The tension in the arena reaches a level no regular or observer could have anticipated. The second floor, designed to separate those who can adapt from those who cannot, has been fundamentally disrupted. Every climber remaining senses it in their bones. The silver-haired irregular is no ordinary competitor. He moves with a calm precision that seems almost unnatural, golden eyes scanning every fluctuation in Shinsoo, every motion of his opponents, every structural weakness in the arena itself. Khun follows closely, providing strategic guidance, analyzing competitor tendencies, and predicting hazard sequences with exacting accuracy. Their presence together shifts the battlefield from a trial of individual strength into a demonstration of controlled inevitability. The remaining rankers, who have watched the events unfold with growing unease, begin to understand the danger in full. This is no longer a challenge of endurance or combat skill. This is a direct confrontation with a being who does not merely survive, he redefines the rules around him. The first ranker to confront Rimuru steps forward with measured intent, a veteran known for tactical brilliance and a mastery of Shinsoo domains. Unlike the previous encounters, this one does not rely on brute force alone. The ranker manipulates authority with precision, bending the ambient Shinsoo into layered constructs designed to trap, isolate, and crush. The arena responds to his commands, walls of compressed energy rising and shifting to corral the irregular. Regulars attempt to flank, but even they hesitate under the sheer efficiency of the domain. The ranker's attacks are flawless in execution, each movement calculated to overwhelm without wasting energy, a true master of the tower system. Yet Rimuru does not flinch. He stands at the center, composed, observing, analyzing every vector of attack, every density fluctuation in the air, every signature of authority layered within the Shinsoo construct surrounding him. He does not simply counter, he evaluates, adapts, and integrates the energy into himself, creating pathways where there should be none and turning potential threats into information streams to be used. The clash begins with subtlety. A barrier rises to block the ranker's first strike, but instead of meeting it head-on, Rimuru allows the energy to flow through him. Great Sage activates deeper analytical processes, examining not just structure and density, but the embedded authority patterns and behavioral tendencies encoded in the ranker's techniques. Within moments, Rimuru understands the underlying logic behind the attacks, the timing, the rhythm, the precise sequence required for the domain to function at maximum efficiency. As the ranker launches a secondary assault with enhanced complexity, Rimuru adjusts in real time, not by evading or defending in the conventional sense, but by subtly manipulating the Shinsoo environment itself. Energy streams once meant to punish are absorbed, restructured, and projected back with precision, leaving the ranker disoriented even as he maintains perfect form. Khun watches, his mind racing to anticipate the cascading consequences. By feeding Rimuru knowledge of the floor layout, hidden traps, and likely ranker responses, he amplifies the irregular's adaptability into a weapon that even the tower struggles to account for. The arena itself becomes a dynamic chessboard. Walls, hazards, and flows of Shinsoo no longer exist purely to challenge climbers. They respond subtly to Rimuru's presence, shaping his movement and enhancing strategic advantage. Regulars falter at every turn. Some attempt coordinated attacks only to have their techniques neutralized before they can converge. Others hesitate, unsure whether to continue or retreat. The subtle manipulation of authority and environmental mechanics creating hesitation where there should be instinctive action. Bam follows instinctively, adjusting alongside Rimuru, while Rock, more experienced in raw combat but less attuned to subtle energy manipulation, finds his movements guided naturally by the changing flows. Every step, every maneuver, every minor decision contributes to a cumulative effect that tilts the battlefield irreversibly. The ranker, sensing the disruption, escalates. He channels authority into a complex multi-layered domain designed to compress and overwhelm, a demonstration of his experience and power. The walls twist and spiral. Shinsoo streams converge in precise arcs intended to trap Rimuru, every attack calibrated to eliminate any advantage. The surrounding regulars watch in disbelief as the attacks unfold with lethal elegance. Yet Rimuru does not fight with raw force. He allows the domain to interact with him, analyzing the structure, deconstructing embedded authority, and absorbing the Shinsoo into his own system. Each strike is processed, patterns memorized, and then redirected or neutralized without a single wasted motion. The ranker's eyes widen, realizing that his usual methods are ineffective. Authority that once bound the environment now flows into Rimuru's control, weakening the domain in subtle but critical ways. The arena quakes under the intensity of the engagement. Floor panels shift, walls tremble, and the currents of Shinsoo bend in ways that defy conventional understanding. Observers above the second floor feel the ripple effects, alarms blinking across panels, readings spiking beyond thresholds as the ranker's domain collapses internally while outwardly appearing intact. Every failed strike and disrupted construct increases tension, and for the first time, the ranker experiences the sense of being outmaneuvered not by strength, but by superior integration of the tower itself. Khun recognizes the moment has arrived. Their combined strategy, the subtle manipulation of authority, and Rimuru's unparalleled adaptability converge into a single decisive opportunity. He positions strategically, guiding BAM and other allies to anticipate residual threats, while ensuring the ranker remains fully exposed to the anomaly's next calculated move. Rimuru steps forward with deliberate calm. The ranker, despite skill and experience, is now reacting instead of initiating. Every angle is accounted for, every stream of Shinsoo redirected or absorbed. The slightest miscalculation will leave him vulnerable, and Rimuru's analysis leaves no margin for error. Golden eyes meet the rankers, unflinching, assessing not aggression but potential, evaluating structural weaknesses in combat logic and environmental control. Then, with precision refined beyond comprehension, Rimuru releases the final vector, a combination of absorbed energy and restructured authority, collapsing the ranker's multi-layered domain from within. The impact is instantaneous. The compressed Shinsoo streams unravel. Flow patterns reverse mid-flight, and the ranker's own techniques betray him as they are absorbed and neutralized. He stumbles backward, shock freezing his expression. Observers above and around the arena freeze as well. This is not defeated by brute force. It is an execution of calculated inevitability, where understanding and integration have outmatched raw authority and experience. For a heartbeat, the arena is silent. The ranker's form wavers as the neutralized energy streams dissipate into Rimuru, authority absorbed completely. Then he falls, a collapse so total that it echoes across the second floor, sending tremors through the remaining structures and leaving even the most seasoned climbers in stunned silence. The first ranker has fallen not to sheer strength, but to the unparalleled combination of Rimuru's adaptability, Khun's strategic guidance, and the subtle, almost imperceptible rewriting of the tower's rules in real time. The implications are immediate and terrifying. This is not merely a victory. This is a declaration that the existing hierarchy of the tower, built on centuries of authority, experience, and controlled progression, can be challenged, bent, and dismantled by those who understand its mechanics more completely than the system itself. The battlefield quivers under the revelation, the currents of Shinsoo settling briefly as if the tower itself hesitates, acknowledging that the rules it has long enforced are no longer absolute. And at the center of this seismic shift stands Rimuru, composed, observant, and more dangerous than any climber has ever imagined. The impact of the first ranker's fall spreads instantly across the second floor. Climbers pause mid-step, their instincts screaming that the rules have changed. What had been a predictable hierarchy built over years of trials and suffering now feels fragile, like ice underfoot. Every regular and ranker within observation range registers a fundamental disruption. The system designed to enforce authority, to filter climbers through pressure and punishment, has been outmaneuvered. Rimuru did not overwhelm through raw force. He integrated, adapted, and converted the ranker's power into a tool to neutralize the threat without unnecessary destruction. Khun watches closely, recognizing that their combined methods have revealed a profound truth. The tower does not merely test power, it measures adaptability, perception, and the capacity to manipulate the very environment in which power operates. With strategic insight, Khun has amplified Rimuru's potential, creating a synergy that the tower itself struggles to interpret, and the remaining climbers feel the shift instinctively. The arena is littered with residual energy from the collapsed domain, Shinsoo currents settling unevenly as if hesitant to return to their original flow. Every competitor who had counted on the ranker's dominance suddenly realizes that power alone is no longer sufficient. Techniques meticulously honed for combat efficiency are rendered ineffective against a climber who anticipates, absorbs, and restructures authority mid-engagement. Even the environmental hazards designed to punish missteps now serve Rimuru's strategy. Neutralized or redirected before they can inflict harm, Bam adjusts instinctively to the subtle currents guiding him, and Rock follows suit, sensing that the battlefield itself has become an extension of Rimuru's control. The remaining regulars hesitate, unsure how to act, while the tower's observers, including administrators monitoring remotely, register a spike in anomaly readings. For the first time, the system perceives that a climber has not only survived but rewritten the terms of the engagement to his favor. Khun steps forward, his gaze sweeping over the remaining participants. Every micro-expression, every posture, every attempted maneuver is analyzed and integrated into his assessment. The gamble he took by aligning with Rimuru has shifted the balance of power. By offering information and guidance, he has positioned himself at the center of influence over an anomaly capable of destabilizing even the most seasoned rankers. Yet he also understands the fragility of the alliance. One misstep, one failure to align strategy with Rimuru's adaptive capacity, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Still, he continues to calculate risk versus reward, recognizing that the benefits of riding alongside this irregularity far outweigh the danger. Together, they have created an unprecedented dynamic, a partnership that thrives not by raw combat ability alone, but through mastery of situational manipulation and environmental integration. The remaining rankers and high-level regulars grow wary. Authority, once a straightforward measure of strength and hierarchy, now bends unpredictably. Shinsoo currents no longer simply respond to exertion. They move in concert with Rimuru's intent, reshaped by his perception and amplified through Khun's strategic input. Attempts to flank, ambush, or overwhelm are neutralized before they manifest fully, leaving aggressors confused, disoriented, and increasingly desperate. Even the most calculated attacks fail, disrupted by flows of energy they cannot anticipate. The arena has become less a test and more a demonstration. One being, with the right guidance, can override the expected outcome of the trials designed for collective evaluation. Every climber is forced to recognize that the anomaly at the center does not simply climb the tower. He bends it to his will. Rimuru does not move hastily. Golden eyes sweep the battlefield, evaluating residual threats, calculating potential trajectories of energy, and assessing every competitor's likely response. He steps deliberately, not with aggression, but with control, turning every attempt to oppose him into an opportunity for observation and assimilation. Khun coordinates subtly, ensuring that allies are positioned optimally and that environmental hazards are accounted for in advance. Together they transform the battlefield into a controlled system where missteps are minimized and strategic advantage is maximized. The remaining regulars struggle to process this. Their techniques, even when perfectly executed, fail to produce the expected outcomes. Authority patterns designed to maintain order and hierarchy no longer function reliably, and the floor trembles under the strain of this new dynamic. The psychological impact on the remaining rankers is immediate. To be defeated is one thing, but to be rendered obsolete by an irregular who does not rely on brute strength and who integrates strategy with environmental manipulation challenges the very foundation of their experience and confidence. Observers note a shift in their behavior, hesitation, overcompensation, and subtle miscalculations that would have been unthinkable moments earlier. The first ranker's fall is more than a loss. It is a revelation, a warning that the tower's hierarchy is no longer absolute, and that any climber, no matter how experienced, can be challenged in ways previously unimaginable. Rimuru and Khun move through the arena with quiet precision, their presence now establishing a new, unspoken hierarchy. Every step, every maneuver, and every absorbed or redirected attack reinforces their dominance without overt spectacle. The floor itself seems to respond, Shinsoo currents aligning to support their movement while neutralizing residual hazards. The remaining climbers are forced into reactive positions, scrambling to adapt to a system they no longer understand, while Bam and Rock follow seamlessly, guided instinctively by the combination of Rimuru's adaptability and Khun's foresight. With each passing moment, the message becomes increasingly clear. The tower's rules are no longer absolute. Its hierarchy can be challenged, and the anomaly at the center is reshaping the very nature of this trial with every calculated move he makes. The arena, once structured and predictable, now vibrates with a tension unlike anything the second floor has ever seen. The first ranker's fall is not just a singular event, it is a seismic shift in the tower's balance. Every climber remaining feels it instinctively. The rules they relied upon to navigate trials, to measure power, and to assert dominance are no longer guaranteed. Authority is no longer absolute. Shinsoo currents, once obedient, now respond not solely to intent, but to Rimuru's adaptive control. Every attack launched against him is processed, absorbed, and either neutralized or redirected. Even the most sophisticated techniques fail, folding back upon their user or dissipating before impact. The sheer precision of Rimuru's integration, combined with Khun's strategic guidance, turns the battlefield into a web where every movement is anticipated and every opportunity exploited. Climbers hesitate, misstep, and falter under the weight of what they cannot predict. Khun observes the subtle ripple effects of their dominance, noting the cascading failures of the remaining rankers and high-level regulars. By providing real-time tactical insight, he has amplified Rimuru's adaptability into a force that not only survives, but controls outcomes before challenges can fully manifest. Every hazard, every hidden Shinsoo trap, and every attempt at manipulation is accounted for. Even those who have faced countless trials and battles now find themselves outmaneuvered by a combination of perception, analysis, and control. The first ranker's fall was a warning, but the continued suppression of other threats solidifies a new, undeniable truth. The tower's hierarchy is vulnerable to those who understand its inner workings more completely than its enforcers. Khun realizes the depth of his gamble. By aligning with Rimuru, he has positioned himself at the center of a transformative force, one that could reshape not only the floor, but the perception of irregulars and authority throughout the tower. Rimuru moves with deliberate, unhurried precision, golden eyes scanning every residual threat and calculating optimal paths through the terrain. Each attack or maneuver that would have been fatal moments ago is now rendered ineffective. Authority streams that once belonged to rankers are absorbed seamlessly, integrated into Rimuru's control, and repurposed to reinforce his dominance without ever needing to be destroyed outright. The remaining climbers are left struggling to respond to patterns they cannot read, movements they cannot predict, and an entity that does not simply climb but rewrites the rules in real time. Bam follows instinctively, adjusting to subtle shifts in Shinsoo flows, while Rock, experienced in raw combat but less adept in adaptive integration, follows the currents guided by Rimuru's subtle influence. Together they create a dynamic force that extends beyond conventional skill, one that turns the arena into a controlled system where failure is no longer a certainty for them but a constant for all others. The remaining rankers attempt to reassert control, pooling their authority in intricate multi-layered domains designed to trap and eliminate. They expect Rimuru to falter against numbers, to miscalculate, to be overpowered by concentrated authority. But each domain is dismantled internally before it can function. Rimuru absorbs the layers of Shinsoo, decodes the embedded authority, and reintegrates it into his own control system. The rankers falter, their expressions hardening as they realize the rules that have guided their dominance for decades no longer apply. Their attempts at coordinated attacks are neutralized in real time, their environmental manipulation rendered inert, and the very mechanisms they relied upon to assert hierarchy are now subtly redirected to work against them. The second floor, designed to crush those unprepared, now amplifies the anomaly's advantage, transforming the trials into a demonstration of mastery over both strategy and environment. Observers across the second floor, from regulars to administrators and rankers monitoring remotely, record unprecedented data. Authority patterns are disrupted. Shinsoo currents are behaving unpredictably. System readings spike as the tower struggles to interpret the anomaly's influence. This is not merely combat, it is the rewriting of the structural logic of the trials themselves. Every movement of Rimuru and every strategic suggestion from Khun shifts the battlefield, forcing competitors to act reactively rather than proactively. The psychological impact is immediate. Confidence erodes, hesitation spreads, and the remaining rankers are faced with a terrifying realization that the anomaly is not only unstoppable in raw potential, but adaptive in a way the tower cannot control. Rimuru's final approach toward the remaining rankers is calm, deliberate, and assured. Golden eyes sweep across each opponent, calculating vulnerabilities and integrating authority flows. Khun positions himself strategically, ensuring that allies are protected while residual threats are accounted for. The remaining climbers, sensing the inevitability of the anomaly's dominance, falter under a combination of environmental manipulation and precise anticipation. Shinsoo bends and flows in harmony with Rimuru's intent, reinforcing their advantage and leaving any opposition struggling to maintain composure. By the end of the sequence, the first ranker's fall is no longer an isolated event. It has set a precedent, demonstrating that authority, experience, and hierarchy are mutable when confronted with an irregular who can absorb, adapt, and manipulate the tower itself. The battlefield, once a proving ground, has become a testament to the supremacy of integrated strategy, adaptive mastery, and the unparalleled power of the anomaly who now stands unchallenged at the center. Golden eyes unwavering, reshaping the tower's understanding of what it means to climb. The chaos on the second floor does not go unnoticed. Word travels swiftly up the tower, filtered through rankers, administrators, and surveillance channels until it reaches the attention of King Jahad himself. He sits upon his throne, motionless yet acutely aware, his golden eyes narrowing as the reports arrive. The anomaly, the irregular who has already consumed a ranker, has toppled the hierarchy of the floor with ease, reshaping the battlefield through a combination of intelligence, adaptability, and subtle manipulation of Shinsoo flows. Every failure, every hesitation, every miscalculated strike is catalogued in Jahad's mind, each one an irrefutable sign that this irregular is unlike any other to have entered the tower in centuries. The news is not simply alarming, it is a challenge to his authority, a question thrown at the very foundation of the power structures he has built and maintained. Jahad leans forward slightly, the faintest ripple moving across his long robe, and in that moment the full weight of his presence begins to radiate toward the second floor. Within the arena, the climbers who have survived the collapse of the first ranker begin to sense it almost instinctively. The air shifts, Shinsoo currents thicken, the subtle flow of energy bending in ways that suggest the arrival of someone whose authority eclipses everything they have previously faced. Even Rimuru, calm and unshakable, pauses briefly, golden eyes flicking upward as his perception registers a new variable of unimaginable magnitude. Khun's gaze follows the same pattern, his mind racing to anticipate the situations. They are no longer dealing with floor mechanics, with local rankers, or with environmental manipulation alone. The intervention of King Jahad introduces a level of authority and power that dwarfs anything they have encountered. The floor itself seems to brace, currents of Shinsoo coiling, shifting, preparing to accommodate or resist the presence of the tower's ruler. Then he appears. King Jahad descends, a figure of absolute dominance, his presence alone warping the space around him. Golden light radiates outward, carrying authority so potent that even the remaining rankers falter instinctively. The irregular has already disrupted what should have been an orderly trial, and now the ultimate enforcer of the tower has arrived. The air crackles as authority collides with authority, a silent tension that spreads like wildfire across the arena. Jahad's eyes lock onto Rimuru, golden pupils unblinking, appraising, measuring, evaluating the potential and threat of a being whose feats have already rewritten the floor's expectations. The irregular, who had assimilated ranker-level authority and manipulated the battlefield with quiet precision, now faces the full weight of a king whose power is legendary, whose understanding of Shinsoo is peerless, and whose presence alone can alter the outcome of any engagement. Jahad's voice cuts through the charged air, calm yet resonant, commanding without raising in volume. He does not speak to intimidate. He speaks to assert reality. Irregular, he says, his tone carrying the weight of centuries of unchallenged rule. You have disrupted the order of this floor, toppled a ranker, and bent the system to your advantage. That is an audacious display. But audacity has limits, and your actions now draw the attention of the tower itself. Every word resonates through the currents of Shinsoo, subtle vibrations carrying both warning and inevitability. The remaining climbers feel it deeply, a pressure that goes beyond strength and speed, one that touches the very rules that govern their existence. For them, the arrival of Jahad is a declaration that no anomaly, no matter how skilled or adaptive, can act without consequence. Rimuru's golden eyes remain steady, analyzing the change in authority flow, assessing the variables introduced by Jahad's intervention. Unlike other climbers, he does not feel fear or hesitation. Instead, he perceives opportunity. A being of such overwhelming power will inevitably reveal the limitations of his environment, and understanding those limitations can provide insight, leverage, and control that might otherwise remain hidden. Khun, standing slightly behind, registers the subtle shifts in the Shinsoo around them, noting that Jahad's intervention, while imposing, is not instantaneous domination. Authority must be exerted, energy patterns must be stabilized, and even a king of the tower interacts with the system according to rules, however flexible they may appear. Every second of observation, every micro-reaction from Jahad adds data to Rimuru's calculations, each input increasing his understanding of how to navigate this new, unprecedented challenge. Jahad does not immediately attack. His approach is measured, deliberate, a test in itself. His presence dominates the arena without movement, his authority flowing outward in layers that influence every Shinsoo current, every environmental hazard, every nervous competitor. The tension is palpable. Rankers who once acted with confidence now hesitate, sensing the disparity between mortal skill and sovereign control. Regulars falter in their positions, unsure whether to flee, fight, or stand in awe. Bam and Rak instinctively tighten formation around Rimuru, aware that the intervention signals stakes higher than they have ever encountered. Khun, however, maintains calculated composure. He knows that any overt reaction, any uncoordinated movement, could give away strategic insight or create openings that Jahad might exploit. Observation, adaptation, and timing are everything. The psychological weight of Jahad's presence begins to take effect. Even as Rimuru remains outwardly calm, the subtle authority flows alter the dynamics of energy in the arena. Shinsoo streams, once fully under Rimuru's manipulation, now pulse with additional layers of constraint. Environmental hazards designed to challenge climbers shift slightly, aligning with the will of the king. The anomaly has faced rankers, but the tower itself, through its ruler, is different. It will test him not only physically, but systematically, evaluating how quickly and effectively he can process, adapt, and integrate a force orders of magnitude beyond anything encountered so far. Jahad's intervention is both a challenge and a demonstration, a reminder that even an irregular of Rimuru's caliber cannot ignore the absolute presence of the tower's ruler. Every eye in the arena, from the remaining regulars to those watching from higher floors, is fixed on the interaction. The air hums with the collision of authority streams, the subtle clash of intelligence and power. and the realization that the tower has entered a new state of tension. For the first time in the second floor's history, a being of incomparable adaptability stands directly under the gaze of the king. The outcome is uncertain. The potential consequences are monumental. And for Rimuru, every observation, every subtle signal, every shift in the currents is being cataloged and processed, transforming what appears to be a confrontation into an opportunity for understanding, adaptation, and control. The stage is set for a reaction that will redefine the power dynamics of the tower. The arena feels heavier under Jahad's gaze, as if every movement, every breath, and every flicker of Shinsoo is being measured against an invisible standard. The presence of the king warps the currents of authority in ways that even experienced rankers can feel instinctively but cannot fully quantify. The remaining climbers tense, realizing that the anomaly they had witnessed toppling the first ranker now faces a force that eclipses all conventional measures of power. Rimuru, standing composed at the center, does not flinch. Golden eyes sweep the arena, scanning not just for physical threats, but for the subtle shifts in Shinsoo that reveal intent, strategy, and potential weaknesses. Every movement of Jahad's robes, every imperceptible ripple in the ambient energy, every slight flex of his posture is catalogued. For Rimuru, the king's intervention is not merely a challenge, it is data, an opportunity to expand understanding and adapt in real time to a force the tower itself has deemed absolute. Khun remains close, his mind racing to calculate scenarios and contingencies. He understands the psychological impact of Jahad's presence on every climber in the arena. The weight of authority, the magnitude of experience, and the subtle manipulation of energy patterns all serve as a reminder that this is no ordinary encounter. Yet Khun also recognizes that Rimuru is not an ordinary being. The irregular's ability to absorb, integrate, and manipulate Shinsoo at a level that even high-level rankers cannot match gives them an edge, albeit one that must be exercised with precision. Khun's strategic input focuses on reading the king's patterns, anticipating the ways his overwhelming authority might interact with the floor, and ensuring that any openings, however subtle, are exploited to maintain balance and control. They are not confronting brute force in isolation. They are navigating an environment where the system itself has been amplified by the ruler's presence. Jahad speaks again, his tone deliberate and measured, reverberating across the floor. You have displayed audacity, irregularity. You have bent the rules of this floor and demonstrated capabilities beyond expectation. But audacity alone does not grant dominance over the tower. Every action has consequences, and every anomaly draws attention. The system will correct itself. Authority must be respected, and the hierarchy maintained. His words carry more than warning. They carry the weight of inevitability. The currents of Shinsoo thicken, subtly resisting Rimuru's influence, testing the extent of his adaptability and forcing recalculation. Every wall, every barrier, and every energy flow becomes a dynamic puzzle, shifting under the influence of the king's presence. Yet Rimuru does not retreat. He absorbs the signals, analyzes patterns, and adjusts, his movements fluid, precise, and seemingly effortless, even under the imposition of Jahad's overwhelming authority. The remaining climbers watch in stunned silence as the exchange unfolds. The first ranker has already fallen, and now the king himself has arrived. The sheer magnitude of the situation is impossible to ignore. Regulars hesitate, unsure whether to act or freeze, their confidence eroded by the visible demonstration of authority that they cannot compete with. Even high-level rankers, who have survived countless floors and trials, sense that the anomaly at the center is not only capable of neutralizing conventional threats, but also of integrating and adapting to forces beyond their comprehension. Every second of hesitation and miscalculation is exploited indirectly, the subtle flow of the environment itself favoring the anomaly without overt aggression. Jahad's presence does more than test Rimuru's adaptability. It tests the tower itself. Environmental hazards, previously neutralized by Rimuru's absorption and manipulation of Shinsoo, now shift subtly under the king's authority, forcing the irregular to recalibrate. Floor panels vibrate, energy flows twist, and the currents ripple in tension. It is a subtle dance of control, not of combat, in which Rimuru measures, adjusts, and maintains dominance without ever escalating recklessly. Khun notices every fluctuation, every micro-adjustment, and feeds predictive insight to Rimuru, ensuring that they remain in a position of strategic advantage even as the king asserts dominance. Every move by Jahad is precise, but so too is every response Rimuru generates, a continuous feedback loop of observation, adaptation, and control that pushes the limits of both combat and strategic intelligence. The psychological effect on the king is subtle but perceptible. Jahad, who has faced countless irregulars, climbers, and insurgents over the centuries, recognizes that Rimuru is different. The anomaly does not merely react. He processes, integrates, and anticipates at a level that challenges conventional understanding. Authority streams that once bent instinctively to the king's will encounter resistance not through defiance, but through intelligent adaptation. Every attempt to exert absolute control is met with subtle counterbalancing. Every predictable environmental hazard is rendered ineffective before deployment, and every manipulative tactic is preemptively neutralized. Observers, both in the arena and from higher floors, note the unprecedented nature of this engagement. This is no longer a trial, no longer a challenge of raw power. It is a confrontation of understanding, perception, and the ability to manipulate systemic mechanics in real time. The remaining regulars and rankers feel the pressure increasing with every passing second. The anomaly, aided by Khun's strategic foresight, remains calm and unyielding at the center of the arena. Jahad's golden eyes sweep methodically over the floor, noting every minor fluctuation in every shift in posture, every strategic placement. His intervention, meant to assert absolute dominance, instead highlights the anomaly's unprecedented capacity for adaptation. Rimuru does not meet aggression with aggression. He meets it with integration, transforming potential threats into opportunities for observation, learning, and control. The floor, once rigidly structured, now exists as a dynamic system under the influence of two incomparable minds, one calculating strategy and manipulating the environment, the other observing, adapting, and integrating authority at a level the tower has never experienced. The subtle escalation of tension continues as the arena braces for the inevitable confrontation. Every movement, every adjustment in Shinsoo flow, every minor interaction between the climbers and the environment is magnified by Jahad's presence. The anomaly's influence grows not through dominance alone, but through understanding and control, forcing even the king to acknowledge that this is no ordinary irregularity. Khun positions himself strategically, anticipating both environmental shifts and potential openings, while Bam and Rock adjust instinctively to the altered currents, their coordination seamlessly integrated into Rimuru's system. Observers, both within the arena and from above, understand that this is a pivotal moment. The tower's ruler has entered the fray, and yet the anomaly remains unshaken, poised, and fully capable of manipulating the very mechanics that define authority, hierarchy, and survival. The presence of King Jahad transforms the second floor into a crucible of power, authority, and perception unlike anything it has ever experienced. Every corner of the arena pulses with the weight of his influence, yet Rimuru stands at the center, golden eyes unflinching, processing, integrating, and adapting to this new level of challenge. The currents of Shinsoo, now infused with the absolute authority of the tower's ruler, attempt to constrain, suppress, and redirect. But Rimuru's understanding of flow, authority, and spatial dynamics allows him to subtly bend even this overwhelming force to his advantage. Each attack, each attempted manipulation of the environment is observed, calculated, and either neutralized or repurposed, transforming the supposed dominance of the king into a series of opportunities for strategic insight. The floor itself seems alive, vibrating with tension, authority, and the silent acknowledgement that this anomaly is unlike any other to have entered the tower. Khun remains meticulously observant, feeding Rimuru predictive insight with split-second precision. Every subtle motion from Jahad is processed for tactical value. Every ripple of authority in the currents of Shinsoo is analyzed for exploitable patterns. Even the king's legendary ability to manipulate his environment cannot fully bypass the integration of Rimuru's adaptability with Khun's strategic guidance. The regulars and remaining rankers falter instinctively, their confidence eroding as the anomaly's calm and deliberate control over the battlefield becomes apparent. What should have been an intimidating intervention has become a display of systemic mastery, where Rimuru does not merely react but calculates, integrates, and manipulates the very forces meant to suppress him. Every step, every pause, every subtle shift in movement is magnified under Jahad's observation. Yet Rimuru remains unshaken, each action precise, deliberate, and optimized for both defense and advantage. Jahad speaks again, his words resonating with the weight of centuries of unchallenged rule. You manipulate forces you barely understand irregularly. You have toppled a ranker and altered the floor's dynamics, but your audacity brings consequences. Authority is not merely strength. It is the right to shape and control. Your actions challenge the system itself, and I will ensure that the balance is restored. His voice carries an inevitability that reverberates through the currents of Shinsoo. Every climber in the arena recognizes the gravity of his presence. The air is thick with energy, every particle vibrating with the subtle pressure of absolute dominance. Yet Rimuru, unshaken, integrates this new variable with ease. Golden eyes scan, analyze, and adapt, calculating not only immediate responses but long-term implications for both the arena and the tower's mechanics. The remaining climbers watch in awe and fear. Regulars who once believed themselves capable of independent action now hesitate, sensing forces far beyond their comprehension at play. Rankers seasoned by countless trials and challenges falter under the realization that this irregularity does not merely react to power, he integrates it, manipulates it, and turns it into an extension of his own presence. Environmental hazards, authority flows, and structural elements of the arena are no longer neutral. They bend subtly to Rimuru's will, a demonstration of systemic mastery that even Jahad must acknowledge. The floor itself, designed to enforce compliance, now exists in a state of tension and flux, responding simultaneously to both the king's absolute authority and the anomaly's unparalleled adaptability. Khun's mind works furiously, calculating the next sequence of moves. Every subtle shift in energy, every micro-adjustment in the arena is a signal. He guides Bam and Rock with split-second insight, ensuring that every ally remains in optimal position while minimizing exposure to potential danger. The collaboration is seamless. Rimuru analyzes, adapts, and integrates. Khun predicts, directs, and amplifies. Bam and Rock adjust instinctively, their movements synchronized with the anomaly's flow. The remaining rankers attempt to coordinate attacks, hoping to exploit openings created by the overwhelming authority of Jahad, but even their combined efforts are insufficient. Every maneuver is anticipated, every approach countered, and every attempt at domination subtly nullified. The psychological impact on Jahad is subtle but present. He, who has faced countless irregulars, masters, and insurgents over centuries, recognizes that Rimuru is a fundamentally different entity. Adaptability, strategic foresight, and the integration of environmental authority make this irregular and unprecedented challenge. The currents of Shinsoo, the structures of the arena, and even the flow of authority itself are manipulated in real time, challenging the limits of what Jahad has previously considered absolute control. Observers note the tension, the subtle clash of minds and forces, and the realization begins to dawn. This is not a simple trial or challenge. It is a confrontation that may redefine the understanding of power, authority, and hierarchy within the tower. Rimuru's calm remains unbroken. Every subtle shift in Jahad's approach, every manipulation of the floor and energy currents, every glance from the king is processed and incorporated. He does not escalate unnecessarily. He waits, observes, and positions strategically, maintaining control even as the absolute presence of the tower's ruler weighs on the arena. Khun continues to feed tactical input. Bam and Rock adjust instinctively, and the remaining climbers can only react, powerless to influence the unfolding dynamic. Jahad's intervention, intended as a show of dominance, instead illuminates Rimuru's extraordinary capacity for adaptation and control. The anomaly does not merely survive under the king's gaze. He thrives, transforming a test of authority into a live demonstration of mastery over even the most absolute forces in the tower. The stage is set, tension crackling across the floor. The second floor, once a proving ground, now serves as a battlefield of perception, authority, and systemic mastery. Rimuru and Khun, golden eyes and keen intellects aligned, stand prepared for the inevitable engagement. Jahad, observing, calculating, and asserting presence, recognizes that this is no ordinary challenge. Every second is a test, every subtle interaction a potential turning point. The currents of Shinsoo, the flow of authority, and the dynamics of the arena respond to the collision of minds and powers, creating a tension that radiates throughout the tower. For Rimuru, every observation is data, every reaction is a calculated adaptation, and the anomaly at the center of this unprecedented confrontation is poised to demonstrate that even the king's intervention, absolute though it may be, is not unassailable. The arena trembles as the confrontation reaches a point no one could have anticipated. Rimuru, calm and composed, remains the axis around which the second floor now pivots. Golden eyes analyzing, integrating, and manipulating the very laws of the tower itself. Jahad's intervention, intended as an assertion of ultimate authority, has instead exposed the vulnerabilities of a system designed to enforce hierarchy, punish mistakes, and maintain order. Authority streams, Shinsoo currents, environmental hazards, all previously predictable, now behave in ways that defy established understanding, bending subtly under Rimuru's influence while simultaneously resonating with the absolute will of the king. Every competitor on the floor feels the change instinctively, from the trembling regulars to the stunned rankers. The floor itself, once a static proving ground, is in flux, reacting to forces that operate on an unprecedented scale. The tower, it seems, is being forced to adapt or collapse. Rimuru's every action demonstrates not just survival, but a systemic mastery over the environment and authority flows. Hazards that should have ensnared him are neutralized or redirected before they can manifest. Rankers' coordinated attacks fail despite their experience and planning, and the currents of Shinsoo bend to accommodate both observation and integration. Khun remains a critical extension of this process, providing predictive insight and strategic coordination that amplifies Rimuru's adaptive advantage. Even Bam and Rock, less capable of manipulating environmental authority, move in perfect harmony with the evolving battlefield, their instinctive adjustments reinforcing the irregular's dominance. The anomaly at the center is not merely climbing. He is reshaping the rules that govern progression, redefining the meaning of challenge, and exposing flaws in the tower's systemic logic that no single ranker, even the king himself, has encountered before. The psychological impact ripples outward as every observer, whether on the floor or in higher monitoring stations, begins to understand the gravity of the situation. The first ranker has already fallen, and now the king of the tower faces an irregular ruler whose influence bends authority itself. This is no longer a trial designed to evaluate strength, endurance, or cunning. It is a demonstration that the tower as an institution is vulnerable to forces that can perceive, adapt, and manipulate its core mechanisms. The currents of Shinsoo, once strictly hierarchical and obedient to rancor, now shift unpredictably. Hazards recalibrate subtly. Environmental panels move against expectation, and the remaining climbers are forced into reactive positions they cannot control. For the first time in the tower's long history, a climber has not only survived the trials, but has begun to challenge the foundational systems that govern them, creating tension that resonates across floors and through every layer of the institution. Jahad, observing the anomaly's manipulation, recognizes the unprecedented nature of the threat. Authority that once bent instinctively to his will is now subtly resisted and redirected. Hazards meant to enforce hierarchy collapse internally, their destructive potential neutralized before deployment. Rancor strategies fail as they are dissected, integrated, and countered in real time. Even the environmental design of the floor itself, previously an extension of the tower's controlling logic, is transformed into a landscape shaped by the anomaly's intelligence and adaptability. For Jahad, this is more than an anomaly. It is a revelation. The tower is being challenged not through force alone, but through the demonstration that intelligence, adaptability, and systemic understanding can circumvent centuries of hierarchy, training, and authority. As the battle escalates, Rimuru begins to experiment with the limits of his influence. Authority flows that once dictated the motion of the environment are subtly rewoven, bending Shinsoo currents to his control while maintaining the appearance of natural flow. Hazards are not destroyed but redirected, their energy repurposed to create openings, isolate threats, or reinforce structural advantage. Rancors attempting to coordinate counterattacks find their efforts undermined not by raw power, but by the seamless integration of the anomaly's calculations with Khun's predictive insight. The psychological effect is immediate. Climbers hesitate, misstep, and falter, their confidence eroded by the realization that their environment no longer obeys the rules they have trained to exploit. Even those with the most experience struggle to respond effectively, leaving the battlefield increasingly dominated by the irregular and his allies. The tower itself begins to react in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Panels vibrate, floors shift slightly, and Shinsoo currents pulse with tension as if sensing the systemic disruption at play. Environmental hazards designed to punish miscalculation are now leveraged by Rimuru to create new opportunities. The anomaly's manipulation is precise, measured, and non-destructive, but the effect is profound. The tower is learning, adapting, and evolving in response to a force it cannot dominate. Khun observes and calculates continuously, anticipating both human and systemic reactions, ensuring that the alliance advantage remains intact, while every subtle fluctuation is converted into actionable insight. Bam and Rock continue to move in harmony with Rimuru. Their instincts aligned with the evolving battlefield, amplifying the irregular's dominance, not through individual strength, but through synchronized adaptation. Observers on higher floors, rankers, and administrators record the unprecedented events, their instruments detecting anomaly spikes beyond historical precedent. Authority patterns fluctuate wildly as Rimuru manipulates the floor, absorbing and redirecting flows that were previously immutable. Hazards meant to enforce hierarchy collapse internally or redirect against aggressors, effectively neutralizing centuries of design control. The tower, built to maintain order, hierarchy, and systemic integrity, experiences a feedback loop unlike anything encountered before. Every intervention by the anomaly challenges structural expectations, every response from Jahad's authority tests adaptability, and every fluctuation in the environment creates new variables for Rimuru to analyze, integrate, and exploit. The system itself is now both participant and subject of observation, adapting, resisting, and evolving under the influence of the anomaly at the center. The climbers remaining on the floor are caught in the tension, unable to assert influence, unsure how to proceed. Rankers who previously relied on experience now struggle against a combination of analytical adaptation and environmental control. Regulars hesitate, frozen by authority they cannot comprehend, and the floor's hazards shift in subtle but critical ways, reducing their effectiveness. Every misstep, hesitation, or poorly timed maneuver reinforces the anomaly's dominance. Rimuru does not act recklessly. He integrates every variable, manipulates authority flows with precision, and observes the effects of his interventions in real time. Khun coordinates seamlessly, ensuring allies exploit openings and maintain safety, while Bam and Rak adjust instinctively, their movements reflecting perfect synchronization with the evolving battlefield. The consequences of these interactions begin to ripple upward. Jahad, witnessing the anomaly's capacity to manipulate, integrate, and adapt to even his direct influence, recalibrates his assessment. The anomaly has exposed vulnerabilities in a system thought inviolable. Every action taken by Rimuru has not only neutralized immediate threats, but has provided insight into the tower's underlying structure. Authority, environmental hazards, and Shinsoo flows are no longer predictable. They have been transformed into instruments of systemic analysis and tactical advantage. Observers record unprecedented anomaly readings, rankers falter under psychological strain, and the floor itself trembles under the weight of events it cannot contain. The tower, long considered immutable, is confronted with a force that not only climbs, but evolves in real time, forcing a reconsideration of the very nature of hierarchy, authority, and survival. Rimuru's golden eyes sweep the arena, integrating every detail, every interaction, every fluctuation, every subtle shift in Shinsoo or environmental hazard becomes data, feeding into calculations that allow adaptation faster than any traditional force could counter. Khun continues his orchestration, predicting systemic responses, environmental shifts, and the potential implications of Jahad's interventions. Bam and Rak move in perfect unison, their instincts finely tuned to the evolving flow of the battlefield. Together, they form a triad of control, adaptability, and predictive intelligence, turning the arena into a landscape where traditional measures of power no longer dictate outcomes. The anomaly is not simply reacting. He is restructuring, adapting, and asserting influence over the tower's systems with precision, demonstrating that authority, hierarchy, and even the king's direct intervention are subject to the mastery of a being who understands the tower at a level previously thought impossible. The first tremors of what could only be called evolution begin to manifest. Floor panels, previously static, shift slightly in response to authority flows. Shinsoo currents bend in ways that suggest adaptive intelligence, and environmental hazards recalibrate automatically, no longer simply destructive, but now interacting dynamically with the anomaly's manipulations. The tower is alive in a new sense, not as a static system enforcing trials, but as an evolving entity responding to a force capable of understanding, predicting, and controlling it. Jahad's presence, meant to assert absolute control, is now a measured variable, a component to be observed, analyzed, and integrated rather than a threat to be crushed. The second floor, once a proving ground, now functions as a living laboratory of systemic evolution under Rimuru's unprecedented influence. The remaining rankers and regulars struggle to comprehend the scale of change. Authority, previously an absolute measure, is now fluid, malleable, and responsive to the anomaly's manipulation. Techniques designed to exploit weaknesses fail as the battlefield itself shifts under the influence of intelligence and control. Hazards, environmental structures, and Shinsoo currents all participate in a dynamic feedback loop orchestrated by Rimuru and amplified through Khun's strategic insight. Bam and Rak move instinctively, their responses synchronized perfectly with the evolving flow of authority, further demonstrating the anomaly's systemic dominance. The tower, long thought invulnerable to disruption at its foundational levels, is forced to contend with a force that adapts faster than it can assert control. Rimuru's calm dominance at the center is both subtle and absolute. Golden eyes sweep the arena, observing every fluctuation, every potential threat, every micro-adjustment in the environment. Khun continues to provide predictive analysis and tactical coordination, ensuring that the anomaly's control is maintained while simultaneously exploiting every opportunity presented by the evolving battlefield. The remaining climbers, unable to assert influence, falter, hesitate, and are systematically neutralized through environmental manipulation and psychological pressure. Jahad, whose intervention was meant to reassert order and dominance, now serves as both variable and observer, witnessing the emergence of a system of control that integrates adaptability, intelligence, and authority at levels previously unimaginable. The tower itself responds not with deliberate intention, but through systemic feedback. Shinsoo currents pulse, floors shift subtly, and hazards reconfigure dynamically. Authority patterns fluctuate, revealing vulnerabilities and opportunities alike. The anomaly at the center, with Khun's insight and the instinctive adjustments of allies, has created a battlefield where conventional measures of power no longer determine outcomes. The floor, previously a test of strength, cunning, and endurance, now functions as a living system, evolving in real time under the influence of a climber who understands and manipulates it fully. Every second of observation, every micro-adjustment, every subtle manipulation contributes to a growing realization. The tower, long considered immutable, faces evolution or potential collapse at the hands of an irregular who transcends traditional understanding. Rimuru steps forward deliberately, golden eyes sweeping the transformed arena. The currents of Shinsoo pulse in harmony with his intent, environmental hazards subtly aligned with strategic advantage, and the flows of authority bend without resistance to his analytical guidance. Khun observes and coordinates, predicting outcomes, guiding allies, and amplifying the anomaly's systemic influence. Bam and Rak adjust seamlessly, their movements integrated into the evolving battlefield. Every remaining ranker and regular watches, paralyzed by the recognition that the anomaly does not merely participate in the tower's trials, he redefines them. The floor itself trembles, responding to the integration of intelligence, authority, and control in ways never before observed. The message is clear. The tower as it has existed may no longer survive unchanged. Every rule, every hierarchy, and every assumption about the nature of climbing is being rewritten in real time by a being who transcends conventional limits and imposes a new paradigm of systemic dominance, adaptability, and evolution. The evolution of the tower accelerates as Rimuru continues to assert subtle yet absolute control over every element of the second floor. Authority currents, once rigidly hierarchical, now pulse in dynamic harmony with his perception, flowing into patterns that optimize both his positioning and the reactions of every climber around him. Even Jahad, standing imposingly, recognizes the anomaly's capability to integrate systemic feedback with unparalleled speed. Every micro-adjustment in Shinsoo, every slight shift in environmental hazards, every residual authority stream is absorbed, analyzed, and repurposed with precision. The remaining rankers and regulars who had once relied on the predictability of the floor now find themselves at the mercy of a force that does not simply react, but anticipates, integrates, and recalibrates in real time. Hesitation spreads, confidence falters, and the arena's energy becomes a living testament to the anomaly's dominance. Khun remains a linchpin in the unfolding transformation. With razor-sharp calculation, he anticipates environmental shifts, predicts Jahad's subtle adjustments, and coordinates the positions of Bam and Rock with millisecond precision. This seamless synchronization amplifies Rimuru's influence, allowing him to exploit every variable without unnecessary risk. The alliance between strategic foresight and adaptive mastery creates an almost invisible web of control, leaving the remaining climbers scrambling to respond to forces they cannot fully perceive. Even the king, whose centuries of experience have honed his awareness to near perfection, finds the anomaly's integration of environmental control and authority manipulation unlike anything he has previously encountered. Every attempted display of dominance by Jahad is met not with confrontation, but with systematic absorption and calculated redirection, forcing the tower's ruler to reconsider the assumptions that have governed its structure for centuries. As the environment shifts, the remaining climbers are forced into desperate reactive measures. Rankers attempt to coordinate attacks, hoping to isolate Rimuru or exploit perceived gaps, but their efforts are anticipated and neutralized before they can manifest. Regulars freeze under psychological pressure, their confidence eroded by the anomaly's calm yet all-encompassing control of the battlefield. Shinsoo currents, once predictable and obedient to hierarchy, now bend subtly to reinforce Rimuru's position, redirect authority flows, and manipulate hazards with surgical precision. Environmental panels and traps, previously static, recalibrate in real time, amplifying the anomaly's strategic advantage. The second floor, designed to test endurance, combat prowess, and intelligence, now functions as a dynamic system of adaptation, responding directly to Rimuru's influence and exposing the limits of conventional power structures. Jahad observes intently, his golden eyes unblinking. Every movement, every manipulation of the environment, every subtle application of authority is a challenge to his perception of the tower's control. He recognizes that this is no ordinary trial, no ordinary anomaly, and no ordinary irregularity. The way Rimuru integrates systemic mechanics, manipulates authority, and synchronizes environmental flows with allies defies centuries of established rules and expectations. Authority streams that once bent without hesitation to the king's will now encounter subtle resistance, redirection, and adaptation. Environmental hazards designed to enforce compliance are transformed into strategic tools, their intended destructive effect neutralized or reversed. Every second of engagement teaches the tower a lesson in flexibility and vulnerability that it has never needed to learn before. The psychological and structural implications are staggering. Rankers who had dominated countless floors falter, their confidence eroding as the anomaly demonstrates a capacity to reshape even the most controlled environment. Regulars hesitate, unsure how to act, and Bam and Rock adjust instinctively, following the flows of adaptation without conscious thought. Khun's strategic insight ensures that every shift in authority, every micro-adjustment in Shinsoo, and every environmental change is exploited for maximum advantage. The floor itself seems to respond to this synergy, vibrations moving subtly through panels and currents, almost as if acknowledging the anomaly's command. The tower, once thought immutable, is now evolving in real time under the influence of a single, irregular capable of perceiving and manipulating systemic dynamics far beyond conventional limits. Rimuru takes deliberate steps forward, golden eyes sweeping the transformed arena. Every hazard is accounted for, every authority stream measured and redirected, every potential attack neutralized or transformed into strategic insight. Khun observes and directs subtly, ensuring allies maintain optimal positioning while anticipating systemic responses. Bam and Rak move instinctively, their reactions synchronized perfectly with the evolving battlefield. The remaining climbers, paralyzed by the anomaly's mastery and the overwhelming authority of Jahad, struggle to assert influence or even predict the outcome of the confrontation. The arena has become a living system under Rimuru's influence, one in which every decision, every movement, and every reaction contributes to a dynamic process of evolution and adaptation that challenges centuries of established hierarchy. Jahad, despite his centuries of experience and absolute authority, begins to acknowledge the unprecedented nature of this confrontation. The anomaly's ability to manipulate authority, integrate environmental mechanics, and coordinate allies with precision challenges the very foundations of the tower's design. Every micro-adjustment in Shinsoo currents, every subtle realignment of hazards, and every reactive calculation exposes limitations in the systems Jahad had considered inviolable. Authority no longer operates as an absolute measure of dominance. It is fluid, dynamic, and subject to manipulation by a being capable of perceiving and integrating the tower's mechanics at a systemic level. The tower itself begins to respond in ways previously thought impossible. Shinsoo currents pulse with adaptive intelligence, floors shift subtly yet purposefully, and environmental hazards calibrate in real time to reinforce strategic advantage. The anomaly's influence is not overtly destructive, but its effects are undeniable. Every remaining ranker and regular feels the subtle shift in authority, the recalibration of environmental variables, and the adaptive pressure that forces them into reactive, often ineffective maneuvers. The system itself is being rewritten moment by moment, evolving under the influence of an irregular who understands not just survival but systemic control. Every observation, every adaptation, every manipulation builds toward a single truth. The tower, once immutable, now faces evolution or risk collapse under the anomaly's unprecedented mastery. Observers from higher floors, administrators, and even other rankers beyond the immediate arena begin to detect anomalies in the flow of authority and energy. Reports spike, data readings exceed historical limits, and the systemic responses of the tower indicate that something fundamental is occurring. The anomaly is not merely navigating the trials. He is reshaping the parameters of engagement, demonstrating that intelligence, adaptability, and integration can supersede raw power, hierarchy, and established authority. Jahad, whose presence was meant to assert absolute control, now serves as a variable in a system being fundamentally redefined. The anomaly at the center of the floor demonstrates mastery over not just the climbers or environmental hazards, but over the tower itself, forcing it into an adaptive state that blurs the line between test and evolution. Rimuru's golden eyes sweep the arena, calm yet unyielding. Every movement, every authority stream, every subtle shift in Shinsoo and environmental hazards is integrated into his strategy. Khun continues to provide predictive insight, coordinating movements, and anticipating both the anomaly's needs and systemic responses. Bam and Rak adjust instinctively, synchronized to the flows of adaptation in ways that amplify Rimuru's dominance without conscious thought. The remaining climbers struggled, their confidence eroded, their techniques rendered ineffective, and their ability to influence the floor severely diminished. Every second reinforces the anomaly's supremacy and the tower's systemic transformation. The stage is set for a moment that could redefine the entire nature of climbing. The tower, a structure designed to enforce authority, test skill, and maintain hierarchy, now exists in a state of dynamic evolution. Authority flows bend and shift, environmental hazards recalibrate, and the floor itself responds to the integration of intelligence, adaptability, and systemic control. Rimuru, at the center, golden eyes unblinking, continues to assert subtle yet absolute influence, orchestrating every movement, every reaction, and every environmental shift with precision. Khun and the allies move in perfect synchrony, amplifying the anomaly's impact. The remaining rankers and regulars, paralyzed by the demonstration, can only react. The tower has entered a new phase, evolution under the guidance of a climber who transcends conventional limitations, demonstrating that hierarchy, authority, and even the presence of its king are subject to manipulation by a being capable of mastering the system itself. Rimuru's calm dominance at the center of the arena now dictates the flow of the second floor. The currents of Shinsoo pulse and shift as if alive, responding simultaneously to his intent and the subtle imposition of Jahad's authority. Hazards, traps, and environmental elements, once designed to punish miscalculation, are now instruments of control and observation. Their energy flows redirected to reinforce strategic advantage and test adaptability. Every micro-adjustment, every subtle fluctuation in authority streams is absorbed, processed, and integrated into Rimuru's ongoing assessment of the floor. The anomaly's influence is systemic. It is not simply about raw power, but about restructuring the battlefield in real time, neutralizing threats before they manifest, and turning potential hazards into advantages. The remaining rankers and regulars can only struggle, their confidence collapsing under the realization that the tower, as they have known it, is being reshaped by a force that transcends all conventional understanding. Khun's predictive calculations continue to amplify Rimuru's influence. Every subtle motion from Jahad, every shift in the floor's energy, and every change in environmental hazards is anticipated and leveraged. Bam and Rak adjust instinctively to the dynamic flows of the arena, their actions integrated seamlessly into the anomaly's larger strategy. Even the king, whose presence was intended to enforce absolute control, begins to realize that Rimuru is not merely surviving or adapting. He is redefining the parameters of authority, hierarchy, and survival itself. Authority streams that once obeyed unconditionally now respond to the anomaly's integration. Environmental hazards recalibrate dynamically, and the remaining climbers falter, unable to assert influence or predict outcomes. The floor has become a living system under Rimuru's guidance, a crucible of evolution where adaptability and intelligence outweigh brute strength and established hierarchy. Observers across multiple floors and administrative monitoring systems begin to detect unprecedented fluctuations. Authority readings spike. Shinsoo currents behave unpredictably, and structural responses deviate from the expected patterns, confirming that the tower itself is in a state of dynamic evolution. The anomaly has not only survived the trials but has forced the tower to adapt, to bend, and to respond in ways that expose the limits of centuries-old rules. Every ranker and regular present senses the seismic shift. The balance of power, the meaning of hierarchy, and the fundamental logic of climbing have all been challenged. Even Jahad must acknowledge that this anomaly represents an entirely new variable, one capable of integrating, manipulating, and mastering forces that were previously considered absolute. Rimuru steps forward deliberately, golden eyes sweeping the transformed arena. The currents of Shinsoo pulse in synchrony with his perception. Environmental hazards recalibrate automatically to reinforce his positioning, and authority streams bend subtly to integrate his intent with the system itself. Khun, with calculated precision, ensures allies are optimally positioned to maximize advantage and mitigate risk, while Bam and Rak act instinctively, moving as extensions of Rimuru's strategy. The remaining rankers and regulars find themselves paralyzed by both psychological pressure and the subtle manipulation of the battlefield. Every attempted maneuver is anticipated, every potential attack is redirected, and every structural or environmental advantage is neutralized or exploited. The tower has become an active participant in the anomaly's mastery, evolving under the influence of intelligence, adaptability, and control far beyond traditional parameters. As the arena settles into this new state of equilibrium, the implications become clear. The tower, long considered immutable and absolute in its rules, is now being tested by an entity that can manipulate authority, integrate environmental and systemic feedback, and coordinate allies with precision that eclipses centuries of established hierarchy. The anomaly's dominance is not achieved through destruction alone, but through strategic mastery, observation, and adaptive control. Jahad the king himself recognizes the unprecedented nature of the situation, the limits exposed in what was once considered perfect authority, and the potential for the tower to evolve or falter under this extraordinary influence. The remaining climbers, once confident in their abilities and understanding of hierarchy, are left scrambling for relevance. Rankers falter, regulars hesitate, and even environmental hazards that should have been lethal are neutralized or repurposed. Every movement, every decision, every subtle adjustment contributes to a growing system of control orchestrated by Rimuru, amplified by Khun, and complemented by the instinctive responses of allies. The tower is no longer merely a proving ground. It is a dynamic system being rewritten in real time. Its architecture, authority, and flow of energy responding to forces previously unaccounted for. The anomaly has forced evolution, challenging centuries of established rules and reshaping the understanding of climbing, authority, and survival itself. Finally, the arena reaches a temporary equilibrium. Authority streams, environmental hazards, and climbers alike exist in a state of tension, responding to the integrated mastery of the anomaly and the subtle presence of the king. Rimuru stands unyielding, golden eyes calm and assessing, while Khun continues to provide insight and Bam and Rock remain perfectly synchronized. The remaining rankers and regulars understand that the tower, as it has existed for centuries, has been irrevocably altered by this encounter. The second floor, once a stage of predictable trials, now functions as a living, adaptive system. The anomaly has demonstrated that survival, mastery, and dominance are no longer determined by hierarchy alone, but by the ability to integrate, adapt, and manipulate the very systems that govern the tower. In the silence that follows, the enormity of the situation begins to settle across the tower. Observers, both on-site and on higher floors, recognize that the balance of power has shifted, that the anomaly at the center has proven itself capable of redefining authority, and that even the king's presence, while monumental, is not absolute against such mastery. Rimuru has climbed not just the physical floors, but the conceptual framework of the tower itself, leaving behind a legacy of transformation that will ripple through every trial, every hierarchy, and every climber yet to ascend. The tower evolves under his influence, or it risks stagnation and collapse, a challenge the centuries-old institution has never faced. And with that, the anomaly turns his gaze forward, golden eyes unwavering, ready to face whatever new trials, adversaries, or revelations await on the floors above. The tower has been tested, the rules rewritten, and the hierarchy challenged. The second floor stands as a testament to the transformative power of adaptability, intelligence, and mastery, and the climbing journey of Rimuru has only just begun.